Hello, dear friends.
Today we are here to reflect on the second Sunday of the Lent. The readings of this Sunday emphasizes on transformation of our lives with God's glory. If you examine a life of a butterfly, the small creature begins its life as a creature, then becomes a cocoon, and through cocoon it becomes a beautiful butterfly. See the transformation in this small creature. Human life involves also transformation. A child grows into an adult into a man. A student becomes a master in his field. And likewise, a sinner transforms himself to be a saint. And this is the transformation with the readings of this Sunday highlights and speaks about. The inner transformation of oneself. The external transformation gives us a different spheres of life in our growth, in our attitudes, in our behavior, an external pattern of change which we exhibit in our life. The inner life helps us to transform oneself from our old way to a new way. And that is the real transformation, metanoia, change of one's heart, change of oneself. Only when there is thirst in our hearts to listen to the voice of God, to see the face of the Lord, only then we will be able to hear the voice of God speaking to our hearts. Yes, my dear friends, it is such profound transformation, the transformation of faith, which we are all called as Christians to live on. There was once a young man who had a fear of great heights. One day he joined his friends to climb a mountain. And as they had approached in climbing the mountain, halfway this young man got dizziness and felt exhausted and said to himself that he cannot continue his journey any longer. And his guide, who saw him exhausted and sitting without hopeless situation at that moment, he came to him and said, "You didn't come here with this fear to stay in half of this trek. There's something beautiful lying ahead. You will be able to see that beautiful thing only when you reach and succeed reaching the height of this mountain." And this young man, with some hesitation, started climbing the mountain. And as he climbed the mountain, he was able to succeed and reach the top of the height. Once he reached the top of the height of the mountain, he saw a breathtaking sunrise over the valley. And very moment his fear vanished. Fear can hold us back from experiencing something very beautiful. Only when we overcome our fear and experience, the transformation happens within oneself. The disciples of Jesus also experienced same kind of fear. They had the doubts and fears within themselves. What was their master's final aim? What was his ultimate aim? And what was their role in following him? And what will be their life in future? They were having all this confusion within their hearts. And Jesus, at this very moment, and this is the time where Jesus takes them on the top of the mountain, where he shows them the glimpse of the foretaste of the glory of resurrection. And in this transfiguration, there are two biblical figures who appear to Jesus. One is Moses and Elijah. Great figures in the Bible because Moses was a great lawgiver. God gave him law on Mount Sinai, where we see in Exodus chapter 20, verses 1 to 21, the 10 commandments. Secondly, he delivered the first 5 books of the Bible, the Torah, the Pentateuch, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. The tradition holds that Moses was the one who wrote these 5 books. And thirdly, he established a covenant between God and Israel. And the covenant which Moses helped this people of Israel to have with God of Yahweh was the covenant on Mount Sinai. That God makes covenant with Moses that Israel as his chosen one. And fourthly, in Deuteronomy chapter 18, verse 15, Moses foretold the coming of a great prophet. There will be a great prophet similar like me who will come to the rescue of the Israel. And this was the speciality of Moses. And secondly, prophet Elijah. Elijah also was a great prophet because he obeyed the commandments of God faithfully. The very first attitude of him was he challenged 450 prophets of Baal who proved whose God was real. And that is the moment a fire from heaven consumed the offerings offered by prophet Elijah at Mount Carmel. We see this in first book of Kings chapter 18 verses 20 to 40, the wonderful sequence of God's glory revealed in the life of prophet Elijah. Secondly, prophet Elijah was a man of miracles. We read in the first book of Kings chapter 17 where the widow of Zarephath, the encounter of this widow with prophet Elijah. The flour and the oil shall never be empty until God sends to this place rain. And thirdly, prophet Elijah was taken to heaven without dying. In the second book of Kings, we read in chapter 2, verses 11. And fourthly, Elijah was precursor to Messiah. In the book of Prophet Malachi chapter 4 verses 5 to 6, we read where Prophet Malachi speaks about Prophet Elijah, the Messiah, the appearance of this prophet before the day of the Lord. Yes, my dear friends, these are the significant qualities of these 2 great figures in the Bible, Prophet Elijah and Moses. They foretold about the prophet, the Messiah, who will be coming to redeem the humanity. And the same prophets are appearing in this transfiguration before Jesus and explaining to him that his mission which he had come will be getting over soon. And as a result, to come, go ahead with the plan that God had prepared in the life of Jesus. Yes, my dear friends, this is the transformation which Jesus foretold to his disciples through this transfiguration. And he's calling us who are his disciples, beloved disciples, to undergo this transformation in our lives as the disciples of Jesus experienced this. When they all were in a confused state, when they were all overwhelmed, when they were not knowing what was their ultimate final life could be. And that is the moment where Jesus is explaining to them through this transfiguration that the resurrection is the final hope of our life. Let us also examine our life, my dear friends. In our life, we undergo various kinds of trials, sufferings, and temptations, where at moment where we become confused and chaosed and not knowing at that moment what to do. And that is the moment when Jesus is inviting us through this transfiguration, is teaching us a beautiful lesson, always to rely and trust in God's plan. Secondly, we should never be distracted by these worldly attitudes, by these worldly assumptions. We cannot succeed with our own plans for our problems. And that is the time where we need to surrender our problems to God, who is more supreme, who is more sovereign of all powerful, can handle our problems and give us a solution to our problems in our life. And finally, trusting in God's plan is not enough. We need to act according to God's plan and His will in our life. That means when we surrender our problems and our situation of our suffering to God, we need to wait patiently for God to act in our lives. And that's where our lives becomes a real transformation as the disciples of Jesus experienced. Let us also, like the disciples of Jesus, as they experienced this awful situation, may we too experience this awful situation when we rely on God's help in our life and experience His divine glory in our life.